Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this episode, we're diving headfirst into a tales of thrills and chills, with 3 short stories guaranteed to leave you looking over your shoulder. And remember, if you love these tales as much as we do, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more adventures every week. Now, sit back, relax, and let the journey begin. First up, we're hitting the beach under the cover of darkness. Join us as a woman on a late-night rock-hounding mission stumbles upon something far more fascinating than a cool fossil. A mysterious being who whispers tales of the beach's forgotten past.
The sand was cool and damp beneath Amelia's sneakers as she crunched along the shoreline. The moon, a luminous pearl in the inky sky, cast an ethereal glow on the waves, turning them into shimmering ribbons of pewter. Amelia wasn't after seashells tonight. Her canvas bag held a small hammer and a magnifying glass, tools for a different kind of treasure hunt: rocks. Tonight, the beach held a strange energy. The usually playful waves seemed to whisper secrets, and the salty breeze carried an undercurrent of something else, something older. As Amelia crouched to examine a particularly glinting piece of granite, a voice startled her.
That rock has seen things, little one. More than you can imagine.
Amelia spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A tall, shadowy figure stood at the water's edge, its form obscured by the darkness. The moonlight glinted off something the figure held, a handful of smooth, iridescent stones. "Who are you?" Amelia stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The figure chuckled, a sound like rustling kelp.
I am the keeper of this beach. The one who remembers. These stones.
It gestured to the ones in its hand.
Each hold a story, a memory of this place.
Intrigued, despite her wariness, Amelia edged closer. The figure's form seemed to shimmer, like a mirage. It began to speak of the beach's forgotten past, of shipwrecks and pirates, of sun-drenched days when laughter echoed across the waves, and of howling storms that reshaped the coastline. As the figure spoke, Amelia felt a connection to the beach, a sense of belonging she'd never known before. The rocks in her bag, once just objects, now felt like whispers waiting to be heard. The first rays of dawn painted the sky with streaks of rose and gold as the figure faded away, leaving behind only the whisper of the waves. Amelia stood there, the weight of the beach's history settling upon her. The rocks in her bag weren't just souvenirs anymore. They were keys to unlocking the stories the beach had shared with her.
Next, we're packing our bags and heading deep into the woods for a camping trip with friends. But what starts as a fun weekend getaway takes a hairy turn when they stumble upon evidence that might just prove the legend of Bigfoot is real.
The campfire crackled merrily, casting flickering shadows on the faces of 3 friends huddled around it: Maya, the ever-skeptical biologist; Ben, the adventurous jokester; and Sarah, the romantic believer in all things mysterious. They were deep in the Sequoia National Park, miles from any civilization, their laughter echoing through the silent trees.
All right, Sarah.
Ben chuckled, poking the fire with a stick.
Tell us again about Bigfoot.
Sarah, ever the enthusiast, launched into a passionate explanation of the elusive creature, her voice filled with conviction. Maya, ever the scientist, countered with logical arguments about the lack of concrete evidence. Their playful debate was a nightly ritual as comforting as the crackling fire. Later that night, as the moon cast an eerie glow on the forest floor, Maya awoke to a blood-curdling howl that seemed to shake the very ground. Her heart hammered in her chest. Had Sarah been right? She nudged Ben awake, her voice a hushed whisper.
Did you hear that?
Ben, momentarily startled, became his usual goofy self.
Probably just a coyote serenading the moon.
He quipped, rolling over. Unsatisfied, Maya decided to investigate. Grabbing a flashlight, she stepped out of the tent, her body tense. The forest was an inky black, the silence broken only by the occasional chirp of a cricket. As she ventured deeper, a twig snapped under her foot. Suddenly, a colossal dark shape loomed before her, its eyes glinting red in the faint moonlight. Maya froze, her breath catching in her throat. This was it. Bigfoot. Panic threatened to consume her, but then the creature let out a sound, not a roar, but a whimper. Cautiously, Maya approached, shining the light on the figure. To her astonishment, it wasn't a hairy beast, but a large lost bear cub. Its leg was caught in a rusty animal trap, fear etched on its face. Relief washed over Maya, followed by a surge of determination. She rushed back to camp, waking Ben and Sarah. Together, using their combined knowledge, Maya's scientific background, Ben's resourcefulness, and Sarah's surprising strength, they managed to free the whimpering cub. As the sun peeked over the horizon, the grateful bear cub limped back into the forest, casting a grateful look at the three campers. Back at camp, they erupted in relieved laughter, the experience forging a new kind of bond.
Finally, we're buckling up for a bumpy ride as a plane crashes in the unforgiving Alaskan wilderness. Our lone survivor finds himself in a desperate fight for survival, but the icy landscape isn't the only thing threatening him. As cabin fever sets in, the line between reality and his imagination blurs, and he's left wondering, is he really being stalked by a mythical Yeti, or is it all in his head?
Frost clung to the tiny windows of the bush plane, blurring the Alaskan landscape into a watercolor wash of white and gray. Milo, a seasoned traveler with sun-bleached hair and wanderlust in his eyes, pressed his nose against the cold glass. Below, jagged peaks clawed at an endless sky. This was untamed Alaska, everything he'd hoped for and more. Then, the engine sputtered. A tremor ran through the plane, escalating into a violent shudder. The pilot, a weathered man named Walt, wrestled with the controls, swearing under his breath. The plane dipped, throwing Milo against his harness. Finally, with a sickening crunch, the world tilted on its axis. Milo awoke to the smell of pine and a throbbing head. Walt. Walt wasn't moving. Panic surged, then settled into a cold dread. He was alone. With a heavy heart, Milo buried Walt beneath a makeshift cairn of stones. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but fear was a more pressing concern. Legends swirled in his mind, tales of the mythical Alaskan Yeti, the abominable snowman. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down his spine. Days bled into each other. Hunger gnawed at him, his once sturdy body weakening. Each night, huddled in a makeshift shelter of branches, he'd swear he saw a hulking figure in the distance, a dark silhouette moving through the trees. Sleep brought fitful visions, gnashing teeth, heavy footsteps, the stench of unwashed fur. Then, on the brink of delirium, he saw it. A massive footprint, larger than any bear's pressed into the snow. His blood ran cold. This was real. Fear, a primal terror, took hold. He stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to escape. Days later, he stumbled out of the tree line, collapsing onto a snowy bank. A figure loomed over him. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the final blow. A gentle voice broke the silence.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Milo cracked open an eye. A woman in a red parka knelt beside him, concern etched on her face. Relief washed over him, a tidal wave erasing the terror. He was found, rescued. Back in the safety of a warm cabin, with a steaming mug of tea warming his hands, Milo recounted his ordeal. The woman, a park ranger named Sarah, listened patiently.
Exhaustion can play tricks on the mind,
She said softly, a hint of a smile in her eyes.
especially out here in the wild.
Milo looked down at his trembling hands. Maybe it was just fear. maybe the Yeti was just a figment of his starving imagination. But a tiny part of him, a part shaped by those long, lonely nights, still couldn't shake the feeling that something vast and unseen had watched him from the snowy wilderness.
That's all for this week's adventures. Be sure to join us next week for more thrilling and fun short stories.